I'm Damon Briggs, 42 years old, decently famous in the kinds of circles where nobody uses their real last names, and everyone pretends they aren't rich. I made my money the way a lot of cowards pretend they did, by stepping over the right people and undercutting the ones who were too slow to notice. Tech, mergers, real estate, a handful of legal battles I paid other men to win for me. I've lived in glass towers and steel penthouses, eaten dinners that cost more than some people's rent for a year, bought cars I never even drove. And somewhere along the way, luxury started tasting like cardboard. Ordinary danger became routine. I've hunted lions in Botswana and pissed off the anti-poaching units. Wrestled a bear once in some rich hunter's deranged private collection. Flown into a live conflict zone with mercenaries because they said they'd let me try shooting at real moving targets. I told myself it was about thrill, about pushing myself to the edge. But really, underneath all the bravado, I think I was trying to keep boredom from swallowing me whole. But boredom always catches up. And boredom has a hell of a good nose. I found the cryptid safari the same way you find things you're not supposed to. A password-locked page on an encrypted forum, buried 3 layers deep under threads about rare animal trafficking and trophy collections worth more than some countries. No pictures, no testimonials. Just a short, arrogant description. For the elite hunter seeking the next rung above apex predators. Private Alaskan Reserve. Limited slots. We provide the quarry. You provide the courage. Below that, a simple link to wire transfer more money than most people would earn in 3 lifetimes. It wasn't even the sum that hooked me. It was the line at the bottom. The pale stalker runs only for those who pay in blood. Edgy nonsense, I thought at the time. Marketing for adrenaline addicts. But I paid, of course I did. A private jet carried me to an unmapped landing strip near Anchorage, the sort of place that doesn't technically exist on any FAA chart. The wind there tasted colder, sharper than city air. Like something half feral was breathing against my neck. I stepped off the jet, bag slung over my shoulder, feeling that familiar anticipatory hum building in my bones. The runway lights flickered. A single SUV idled nearby with its headlights off. There was no driver inside, at least none I could see. But the back door clicked open like a waiting mouth. When I climbed in, a man in a full wolf mask turned toward me from the front passenger seat. Not a costume store thing. This one had lacquered teeth, carved wood. His breath wheezed through a voice modulator, turning his words into a metallic snarl. "Briggs, confirmed. You will follow protocol." "Yeah?" I smirked, leaning back. "I paid enough that you people should be following my protocol." He didn't answer, didn't even move. Just stared at me through that mask as the car began driving itself down a narrow road that wasn't on any map. They took me to a small private helipad lit by lanterns instead of bulbs. Old metal lanterns filled with something that smelled like burning sage. The wind kept trying to snuff them out. Every time the flame flickered, the tree lines seemed to bend a little closer. The wolf-masked man escorted me to the helicopter. A sleek black machine, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see a reflection. The pilot wore a stag mask, taller and more ornate, with branching antlers that scraped the ceiling when he leaned forward. "Destination is restricted," the wolf rasped. "You will not ask where we are going." "Is this the part where you tell me I might die?" I joked. He tilted his head. "Slow, too slow. Death is a mercy reserved for those the forest ignores." And then the helicopter lifted off, blades carving the dusk into ribbons. Below us stretched nothing but raw Alaskan wilderness. Dark, untouched, ancient. The kind of place no map wants to remember. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement, not adrenaline. Instinct. Animal, primal, buzzing like static behind my ribs. As if some buried part of me knew I'd just paid a fortune to fly straight into a mouth that had been hungry for far longer than I'd been alive. The helicopter cut through the Alaskan dusk like a surgical blade, slicing open layers of mist and cloud. The man in the wolf mask sat across from me the whole time, unmoving, hands folded in his lap as though he'd been carved from glacier ice. His voice modulator crackled with each breath, a faint mechanical rasp underscoring the steady thrum of the rotors. I've flown over forests on 5 continents, but Alaska is different. Older, deeper, untouched in a way that feels almost confrontational. Below us sprawled a black-green ocean of spruce and cedar, treetops bristling like the fur of some titanic animal. The forest extended beyond the horizon, interrupted only by the jagged white teeth of distant mountain ranges. Ice-glazed rivers wound through the landscape like pale veins. Fog curled above frozen swamps. Shadows moved where nothing should have been moving. I leaned forward to get a better view, and the stag-masked pilot jabbed a finger toward the window. "Do not stare into the tree line," he warned, voice layered with metallic distortion. "It stares back." I wasn't in the mood for mysticism. I stared anyway, and for a moment, just a flicker, I saw a pale shape weaving between the trees. Something that moved with too much intent to be a deer, too much speed to be a man. The helicopter banked sharply, as if to pull me away from whatever I'd almost seen. Eventually a clearing appeared. A hand-carved landing pad lit by torchlight, encircled by old wooden totems carved into animalistic shapes. Elongated faces, crooked horns, hollow eyes. The helicopter descended, kicking up snow and frost, and the wolf-masked man gestured for me to disembark. The air hit me like a slap, cold, pure, heavy with pine resin and something else. Something sweet and rotten buried beneath the snow. A handful of figures were waiting for us, all unmasked, all wealthy in that obscene, quiet way that makes them look bored with their own existence. I recognized the first one instantly. Tyler Maddox, YouTube's favorite extreme hunter, notorious for shooting tranquilized tigers and calling it bravery. He had the energy of a man always performing for a camera, even when none were around. "Briggs, right?" Tyler grinned, slapping my shoulder like we were teammates. "Hell yeah, man. Didn't think you had the guts for this kind of thing." I didn't bother answering. If he needed to think we were rivals, let him. Next was Seneca Vale, heiress to some cosmetics empire, dressed in a designer snowsuit worth more than the average suburban house. She looked me up and down, bored already. "Oh," she sighed, "another alpha male millionaire. This is gonna be such a testosterone festival." I didn't dislike her. At least she was honest. Then came the retired general, Colonel James Harrow, barrel-chested, crew-cut, eyes like someone who'd seen a war he wasn't supposed to survive. He shook my hand firmly, studying my face the way men like him do. Assessing, cataloging, judging. "You've hunted real things?" he asked. "Some enough." Harrow nodded once. He respected danger. Or maybe he respected dying well. Tyler laughed in his face. Seneca rolled her eyes. Harrow muttered something about amateurs. I turned to the wolf-masked guide beside me. "Who else is coming?" I asked. He tilted his head, the movement slow and predatory. "Only those the forest permits. And the forest does not permit many." A second helicopter descended behind us, dropping off more masked staff. Each one silent, each wearing the same bone-white voice modulators that made them sound like ghosts suffocating inside their masks. They carried gear crates, weapons encased in black metal, ritual objects made from antlers and ash. Tyler whistled. "Now that's what I paid for." As the torches flickered in the wind, the wolf-masked guide raised a gloved hand. "Hunters of the elite, you will follow us. The initiation begins at the Lodge of Silence. Keep your distance from the trees. They remember old blood." Seneca scoffed. Harrow stepped forward with soldierly resolve. I glanced once more at the tree line. A cold wind passed through the clearing. The trees swayed, and I could have sworn something pale and tall moved just beyond the torchlight, watching us with reflective deer-like eyes. Something was waiting, not for all of us, just for the ones who thought they were predators. I didn't say anything to the others. What would be the point? The Lodge of Silence was nothing like the luxurious hunting cabins I'd seen in Africa or Eastern Europe. It wasn't even a lodge. It was a circle of weathered totem poles surrounding a roofless pavilion built from blackened timber. A pit of snow-dusted coals smoldered at its center, exhaling ribbons of pale smoke that smelled faintly of scorched pine resin and something metallic, like the lingering ghost of dried blood. As soon as we entered the clearing, the staff emerged from the shadows. A dozen of them, all wearing their masks. Stag, owl, fox, bear. Polished bone white with carved elongated snouts or antlers dark as obsidian. Their breath fogged inside the masks, seeping through the teeth and nostril slits in slow, rhythmic pulses. They formed a perfect circle around us, silent except for the faint mechanical hum of their voice modulators. Seneca hugged her arms. Tyler, idiot that he was, grinned and waved at the masked figures. Colonel Harrow alone stood still, one hand resting lightly on the handle of the knife at his belt. The wolf-masked guide stepped forward, raising a long wooden horn carved with runes that looked disturbingly organic. Twisted, branching, grown rather than etched. He blew once. The sound was low, resonant, and wrong, like something ancient was being woken up inside the earth. The staff spoke in unison, not loudly, not theatrically, just a synchronized layered monotone that raised the hair on my arms. Hunters, you stand on the edge of the deep wood. The forest accepts your challenge. The Pale One watches, and so the rules will be obeyed. I shrugged. I've broken rules before, especially ritualistic ones, but as the circle tightened around us, I couldn't ignore the feeling that these weren't rules for gameplay. They were rules for survival. The stag-masked figure approached each of us, handing out laminated cards. I read mine. Rule 1. Stay inside your assigned hunting pod until the horn sounds. Rule 2. Never follow a voice calling your name, not even if it sounds human. Rule 3. If you hear bones clicking, remain perfectly still. Rule 4. Do not shoot unless you see the eyes. Anything else is bait. Rule 5. If you are marked with ash by the guides, do not wipe it off. Tyler snorted. Seneca rolled her eyes dramatically. This is just immersive theater stuff, right? Tyler whispered to me. Probably, I said, though even I felt a chill. Not fear. Something closer to premonition. The wolf mask gestured, and the mask staff brought out the hunt gear. At first it seemed normal. Insulated suits, thermal boots, gloves with reinforced grips. But up close, I saw the stitching. Heavy, crude, like they'd been sewn by hand. Some parts were patched with animal hide. Others reinforced with metal plates that looked deliberately scratched. The real surprise was the weapons. Not the rifles, those were top-of-the-line custom hunting rifles, the kind you use to drop a bull elk from 100 yards. It was the secondary items that bothered me. Long bone-handled knives, bundles of dark powder wrapped in hide. Harrow examined his knife with a frown. "This is obsidian," he muttered. "You don't give obsidian to tourists. It's brittle." The bear-masked guide interrupted him with a simple sentence. "The Pale One cannot be cut with steel." Tyler laughed as if it was a punchline. Harrow didn't. One by one, the masked figures stepped forward carrying small urns of black ash. They dipped gloved fingers inside and traced symbols across our chests and foreheads. The ash was cold, but not normally cold. Unnaturally frigid, like it had been harvested from something that had never known warmth. Seneca wrinkled her nose. "Seriously? Do we have to keep this crap on?" The owl mask turned its head toward her with a slow, bird-like movement. "If you wipe it off, the forest will not recognize you as a hunter." Seneca stopped complaining. I noticed the symbols they painted on us weren't random. They were runic, geometric, almost mathematical in their precision. As they marked me, the fox-masked guide whispered softly, so only I heard, "You do not fear enough. That is your flaw. That is why it may choose you." I felt something cold trace down my spine. Tyler nudged me. "Man, you really think any of this is real? It's a scare tactic, a vibe-setting thing. They do it at haunted houses." But haunted houses didn't have armed worshippers with animal skulls for faces. When the preparations were finally done, the masked staff stepped back. Silent, unified, waiting for something. The wolf mask raised the horn again. "The deep wood accepts your offering. Your hunt begins at the darkening of the horizon. Prepare your pods. Do not stray. Do not disobey. Do not presume safety." Then the entire masked circle bowed their heads. Every torch around the lodge blew out at the same time. No wind, no movement, just extinguished. We stood there, surrounded by sudden darkness and the shapes of towering trees creaking in the cold. Tyler whispered, "Man, they're good at this." But somewhere beyond the tree line, something shifted. Not branches, not an animal. Something tall, something pale. And from deep in the woods, carried on the icy wind, came a faint sound like a pair of bones tapping together. Every masked guide froze in place. The shadow vanished. The forest went silent. And the wolf mask said only one thing: "Return to your pods, now, before it's too late." The hunting pods weren't sleek metal blinds or climate-controlled huts. They were raised wooden platforms wrapped in hide and lashed with sinew, each perched atop sets of narrow stilts that groaned in the cold. Calling them pods was generous. They looked like something prehistoric hunters might have built after watching a treehouse collapse. A narrow ladder led up into each pod. When I climbed into mine, the wood creaked like it resented my weight. Inside was just enough room for my pack, the rifle, and myself. The small window slit faced the darkening tree line. No heater, no light, just the cold and the view. The wind had died completely. In any other scenario, I might have chalked it up to weather. But the memory of those masked guides, going rigid at the sound of clicking bones, kept replaying in my head, like an unwelcome echo. Tyler was in the pod nearest to mine, maybe 40 yards away. I could see his silhouette shifting, fidgeting, undoubtedly live streaming to his hidden camera despite the strict no recording rule. Every couple of minutes, he'd pop his head out of his slit window and whisper shout, "Damon, you hear anything? Or is this just fancy camping for psychopaths like us?" Harrow's pod was farther down the line. The colonel hadn't said a word since we'd returned from the ritual. If Tyler was a buzzing mosquito, Harrow was a black hole. Silent, cold, absorbing everything. I settled into my seat, rifle against my lap, heart beating a little too loud for my liking. The ash symbol painted on my chest itched beneath the fabric of the hunting coat, like it was reacting to something in the air. Then the stillness deepened. Not the natural quiet of a forest at night. This was suffocating, absolute, engineered. I held my breath. Even the snow seemed to stop falling. A single horn blast shattered the silence. Long, low, vibrating through the wood under my boots. My hands tightened on the rifle. The rule echoed in my head. Stay inside your hunting pod until the horn sounds. Well, that was the horn. Time to play their game. I climbed down, boots sinking into powdery snow that seemed oddly warm at the surface, but ice cold just beneath. Tyler was already out of his pod, waving his rifle around like an excited kid with a new toy. "Showtime," he grinned, breath puffing in thick clouds. "Whoever bags the thing first gets bragging rights, and maybe a billionaire bonus." I didn't bother responding. Harrow had already exited his pod, moving with deliberate precision, scanning the tree line for movement. His expression never changed, just this unreadable cold vigilance. A soldier's gaze, a predator's focus. The guides did not join us. Not a single mask in sight, not even watching from the shadows. It was just us, the forest, and whatever rules we had been given to keep us alive. We advanced into the trees. The snow muted our footsteps. The night pressed close, and some irrational part of my mind began to whisper that the trees were arranged differently than when we'd first arrived, as if the forest had shifted while we weren't looking. "Can't see shit," Tyler muttered, sweeping his flashlight beam across the underbrush. "Turn that off," Harrow said sharply. "What? Why?" Harrow didn't answer with words. He simply tilted his chin toward a tree on our left. A clean vertical scar sliced through the bark. A claw mark, deep enough to reach the pale wood beneath. The edges were fresh, too fresh. Snow hadn't had time to settle in the grooves. Something had been here recently, watching, and the trees beyond the scar seemed wrong. Bent, arched inward, like they had been leaning toward whoever made that mark. "Probably part of the setup," Tyler whispered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I scanned the darkness, trying to find the reflective eyes the rules mentioned. Nothing. Just a wall of black trunks and white snow. A cold gust of wind cut through the clearing. The first breeze I'd felt since the pods. It carried something faint. Not a sound, not a whisper. More like breath. Something exhaling. Slowly, deliberately. Tyler froze. Harrow raised his rifle. I swallowed hard. Movement, Harrow said quietly. Where? I whispered. He didn't answer, because the forest answered for him. A shape darted between two trees. Too tall, too thin, too fast. The flashlight beam caught only a smear of white that vanished before the light even settled. Tyler gasped. I steadied my rifle, breath fogging the air. Could be one of the guides. No, Harrow said. The guides don't move like that. Another shape, a flicker behind us. Then, the crunch of snow far too heavy to be human. Tyler rotated wildly, rifle trembling. Damon, man. Tell me that's one of theirs. Tell me they've got actors out here. Stay calm, I said. It's just theatrics. Psychological intimidation to heighten the experience. But the words tasted hollow, like I was lying to myself. A branch cracked behind us. A sharp, wet sound like bones snapping. We spun around as one. Nothing. Just the forest standing too still, too attentive. Harrow's jaw tightened. It's circling. Tyler swallowed loudly. What is? The thing we're supposed to be hunting, I said, because admitting fear seemed worse than pretending control. The wind shifted. Something creaked. High above us, like weight shifting on a branch. A slow scraping sound. Tyler looked up. His scream was cut off as I clamped a hand over his mouth. Because perched above us, just for an instant, was a shape clinging to the tree trunk. Long-limbed, pale, eyes glowing faintly, like a deer caught in headlights. Then it vanished. Not leaped, not scurried, just vanished. Tyler trembled violently. Damon, that wasn't human. I wanted to reassure him, but I couldn't, because something inside me was screaming. The instinct that had kept me alive through war zones, riots, mercenary hunts, and a lifetime of reckless thrill-seeking. This wasn't a show, this wasn't a game. Something had changed in the woods. It was awake, and we had just trespassed on its territory. We pushed deeper into the Alaskan forest, the kind of wilderness that felt older than language. Moss swallowed the bases of towering spruces, and frost clung to every shadowed branch like delicate white fur. The air was so cold it felt sharp in the lungs, and any sound seemed unnaturally amplified. Taylor stayed close to me, the closest thing he had to a normal presence here. Tyler still cracked jokes under his breath, but the humor had begun to ring a little hollow, like he was performing for himself more than anyone else. Ahead, Harlow moved with unsettling precision, cutting through the brush like he had memorized the land before stepping foot on it. Behind us, Seneca lingered, clutching her rifle awkwardly, repeatedly checking the safety as though reassurance could be found in the cold metal. The further we walked, the more I noticed it. An odd heaviness hanging in the forest. The wind didn't sound right. It didn't even feel like wind, more like a breath between the trees. Then came the voices. At first, they were faint. A syllable, a familiar tone, a suggestion of a name half heard. I froze, so did Tyler. Harlow paused only briefly, jaw tightening, but then continued forward as if refusing to acknowledge anything unusual. Seneca stopped completely. From somewhere deep in the woods, a man's voice called out, warm, pleading. Seneca, honey, where are you? Seneca's eyes went wide. Her breath hitched, and she turned toward the sound, her face breaking open with shock. That's Mark, she whispered. That's his voice. I swear to God, that's him. My heart punched against my ribs. No, Seneca, don't. Do not answer the voice that uses your name. It's not using my name, she said, voice trembling. It's just, he's calling for me. He must be hurt. They told us this was just a game. They lied. Mark's here. I know his voice. Seneca, stop, I insisted, stepping toward her. I reached out to grab her arm, but she pulled away sharply, shaking her head. Her fear was replaced by a kind of hollow certainty. The look of someone who needed to believe the impossible, because the truth was too heavy to bear. Tyler swallowed hard. "Seneca, please. You know he's at home. You know that." But the forest spoke again. More clearly, more human. "Seneca, I'm cold. Help me." She broke. Seneca dropped into a half-run, half-stumble toward the sound, branches snapping loudly as she pushed her way through the underbrush. "Seneca!" Damon shouted after her. "Don't go. Don't go, it wants you to." Her silhouette vanished behind a curtain of pine. The woods went deathly silent for a moment. Then the scream came. It wasn't the kind a person gives when they're startled or even when they're dying. It was a tearing, primal, disintegrating sound, like her soul was being pulled out through her throat. The sound spiked through the trees, ricocheting off the trunks, shaking loose little avalanches of frost. I felt my blood go cold. Tyler's face drained of color. What the hell was that? Harlow turned slowly, his posture stiff, eyes unreadable behind his mask of calm. "We were warned. The forest here is not empty." "That wasn't a warning," I said. "That was murder." Harlow didn't argue. Somewhere far off, the voice that had sounded like Seneca's fiancée spoke again. But now it was wrong. Stretched, amused. "Thank you." My skin crawled. Rule 2 wasn't a superstition. It was a survival law. The hunt had changed. The forest had revealed itself. And whatever was mimicking their loved ones was no longer trying to lure just one of us. We didn't talk about Seneca's scream. We didn't need to. It followed us, echoing inside our skulls long after the real sound had died in the trees. I kept replaying the last look on her face, the desperate certainty that she'd heard someone she loved. I wanted to tell myself I wouldn't have fallen for something like that, but I didn't believe it. Harlow was far ahead of us. His silhouette disappeared behind the trees. Tyler was the first to speak. "Damon, we're done, right? We're going back." I nodded. "Yeah, we're not part of this anymore." The words felt thin, like they belonged to someone who still believed that decisions mattered out here. But I said them anyway because the accepting that we were trapped inside someone else's ritual was too much to swallow all at once. We turned around and retraced our steps, walking faster than before. The cold felt sharper now, biting through our clothes. Even the forest seemed different. Tighter, hungrier, as if the trees were leaning in, listening for weakness. Tyler kept glancing over his shoulder. I kept watching the shadows between the trunks. My heart was thudding so hard it felt like each beat was announcing our position to the entire forest. Fear wasn't new to me. I had lived through ambushes, interrogations, betrayals that had ended in blood. I'd been in rooms where the wrong word meant a shallow grave. But the fear I felt now was something else. Something I'd never learned how to fight. Because this fear wasn't rational. It felt ancient, instinctive. Like my bones remembered something from a time before people had names. We'd barely made it 100 yards when a gunshot split the air. Sharp, close. Tyler and I froze. "That was Harlow's direction," he whispered. I didn't want to go toward the sound. Every part of me recoiled at the idea. But the forest gave us no choice. Staying still felt like waiting for the trees to breathe down our necks. So we moved. Quietly, quickly. Rifles up, shoulders tight, breath shallow. The snow had been disturbed ahead. Broken branches, dragged tracks. Something heavy pushed through the undergrowth. Not human footsteps, not quite animal either. Patterns that didn't make sense even if I tried to force them into logic. I smelled something before I saw anything. Copper, iron, something hot that didn't belong in the freezing air. Then Tyler gagged. "Damon, Jesus Christ." I followed his gaze upward. For a second, my brain rejected what I saw. It tried to flip the image, swap objects, find a sane explanation. But there was none. Harlow. Calm, confident, perfect posture. Harlow was folded in half at the waist, like someone had tried to close him like a suitcase. His spine had snapped so cleanly it looked deliberate, almost surgical. His legs were on the ground, knees bent inward at impossible angles, boots still tied neatly. The rest of him, his upper body, was 20 feet up a tree. His head was wedged between two thick branches, facing downward. His jaw hung slack, split unnaturally wide, tongue lolling as if someone had pulled it for inspection. His left arm dangled beside him, long knife still sheathed on his belt. His right arm was missing entirely, torn off at the shoulder, blood frozen into dark icicles down the bark. Tyler whispered, How does something get a man up there?" I didn't answer, because the thing that crawled up my spine wasn't the horror of Harlow's position. It was the realization that there were no footprints, no tool marks, no indication of climbing. Harlow's body had been placed there by something that didn't need the ground. Even the tree seemed to lean away from his remains, branches sagging under the unnatural weight, bark split where bone pressed against it. Tyler started shaking. I could hear the click of metal as his finger trembled near the trigger. "We need to go, Damon. We need to." But then something else caught my attention. Harlow's remaining hand, his left one, was pointing. Not limp, not falling by gravity. His finger was hooked downward, aimed at something carved into the trunk below. Rough scratches, deep ones. Letters. Not English, not any alphabet I knew. But the shapes felt like they wanted to be read. Like the forest knew what they meant even if I didn't. Tyler grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it." I tore my gaze away, because for a fraction of a second, I'd felt the carvings move. A wind stirred the treetops. Slow, deliberate, like a long breath exhaled through teeth. I swallowed hard. "Tyler, we run now. No debate, no plan, just survival." We tore through the underbrush, branches whipping our faces, snow exploding under our boots. I didn't know where we were going, only that it had to be away from whatever had whispered behind us. Tyler was wheezing beside me, breath coming in sharp bursts, the kind you hear from a man trying not to scream. Then I heard it, a crisp, deliberate clatter, like two bones snapping together. Rhythmic, confident, getting closer. I stopped so abruptly Tyler slammed into me. "Why, what the hell are you?" "Rule 3, I hissed. "We freeze." He stared at me, breath clouding the air. The moonlight caught a smear of snow melting on his cheek. His expression was the perfect blend of terror and disbelief. "Damon, we can't just." The clicking sound rolled through the trees, slower now, measured, almost curious. I grabbed Tyler's arm and dug my fingers in. "Don't move." Even speaking felt like breaking some sacred taboo. My voice came out thin, almost childish. But Tyler stopped breathing and went statue still, so maybe that was enough. The forest hushed around us. Not quiet, expectant. The way a crowd goes silent before the executioner swings. Somewhere behind us, snow crunched under something much heavier than a person. Not steps, more like mass shifting. A weight sliding across earth. Then came the breathing, deep, wet. A long inhale that rattled like lungs full of water. Tyler's fingers twitched next to me. Click, single, sharp. Right behind my head. My scalp crawled so violently I thought my hair would rip out. I didn't dare blink, didn't dare swallow. Even the forest stopped creaking. Cold settling around us as if time had frozen. Then, a sound like knuckles scraping bark. Something was leaning close. Close enough to smell the metallic breath rolling over my neck. It reeked of frozen meat left too long in the dark. My stomach churned. Tyler trembled beside me. I felt it through the air, not movement but tension vibrating off him like static. He was unraveling. "Damon," he whispered. Barely sound, barely breath. "I can't." I wanted to punch him, tell him to shut up, tell him to run. None of those impulses mattered now. Survival hinged on stillness, and Tyler was slipping. The clicking grew louder, faster, excited. I closed my eyes. A voice brushed my ear. Too stretched, too wrong. "Turn around." Tyler cracked. "No!" he shouted as he spun, rifle snapping up. The world detonated. His gun fired point blank into something impossible. Something huge, something fast. The muzzle flash lit the trees and revealed a shape I couldn't process. Limbs bending the wrong way, torso hollow like a ribcage turned inside out, face a sheet of trembling skin stretched too thin. The blast was followed by a sound I will never forget. Not a scream, something far worse. A shriek pitched so high it shredded the air, layered with grinding bone and ripping flesh. Snow shook loose from branches. Birds exploded into flight. I felt the sound inside my teeth. Tyler fired again, blindly, desperately, and then something hit him hard. I heard his breath punch out of him, a rustle, a thud. Then, the agonizing drag of something heavy being pulled across leaves and ice. He didn't scream, not once. Just a wet, choking gasp, and then silence swallowed him whole. I stayed frozen. My muscles burned, screamed, begged. But fear commanded everything now. Fear held me more effectively than any trap. The dragging continued, farther and farther. The clicking resumed, slow, displeased, retreating into the depths of the forest. And then nothing. No breathing, no crunching snow. Just the soft whisper of wind curling between the trees. Only when the last trace of clicking faded did I let my body move. It was like rising from a tomb. My knees nearly buckled as I forced myself to turn around. Tyler was gone. In his place, a long streak of blood carved an unmistakable trail through the snow. It led between the trees, zigzagging deeper and deeper into darkness until it vanished into blackness. The forest seemed to lean back again, like it had retreated after taking its due. I swallowed hard, breath shaking. "I'm alone," I whispered to no one. The forest swallowed the last echoes of Tyler's death, leaving me in a silence so total it felt personal. Like the trees had leaned in close to hear my heartbeat fail. I forced myself to walk. I moved slow, steady, careful, cradling the rifle like a talisman that suddenly felt more symbolic than useful. Snow crunched beneath my boots. Somewhere far behind me, a lone owl hooted, too calm, too normal, like it didn't realize the world had already ended. Then I heard Tyler's voice. "Damon, hey. Hey man, wait up." I froze so hard my breath caught mid-exhale. No, not possible. Tyler was dead, dragged into the dark like meat on a rope. That thing had taken him apart. I'd heard it. "Damon." The voice was closer, threaded with pain, with choking. "Help me." I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw popped. I wanted to turn, needed to, but logic, cold, brutal logic, whispered the truth. It was mimicking him. The pale stalker didn't just kill, it learned. The wind shifted, carrying that familiar voice around me in a slow spiral. "You left me, Damon. Why did you do it?" My stomach lurched. It wasn't just copying sound. It was stitching emotion into it. Tyler's fear, his last breath, his confusion. "Damon." A different voice now. "Hi." Trembling. "Seneca." "Oh God. Damon, please." I didn't mean to go. I didn't know it wasn't him. My skin crawled, every hair lifting. I felt surrounded, the voices threading through branches like fog. Some sounded close enough to touch. Others whispered from impossible heights above me. Then, another voice. Low, controlled. "Harlow. I'm not dead." His tone was even almost amused. "I can still shoot. Damon, follow my voice." The voice broke mid-sentence, snapped, like something tugged a puppet string too hard. "Damon, help." A wet gurgle, a bone crack, and silence. My breath fogged violently in the air. I realized I was shaking, not from cold, but from understanding. The pale stalker wasn't just hunting me. It was toying with me. The others, slaughtered fast, efficient, clean. I'd seen animals hunt before, big cats, wolves, bears. Efficient predators didn't play with their food. But this wasn't an animal. This thing was an old, patient, malicious intelligence. A hunter that enjoyed dread the way others enjoyed blood. Every voice it mimicked carried a little more awareness, a little more deliberate cruelty. Damon. Now it was using a voice I didn't recognize. Distorted, female. "Come back to camp." The guides, I recognized their muffled voices through modulators. At that moment I realized, animal masks, silent movements, strange rituals. A seriousness we'd laughed at, and the ash. They had smeared ash onto our clothes with too much reverence for it to be theatrics. They'd spoken those rules with something like fear, not flair. We weren't thrill seekers to them, we were offerings. We were prey delivered on a silver platter. The safari wasn't meant to entertain us. It was meant to feed the cryptid. Only the richest, most arrogant, most disposable people money could buy. Of course they masked themselves. Of course they modulated their voices. They weren't guides, but a cult delivering sacrifices to their god. And they had delivered me. Somewhere to my left, the forest groaned, as if something massive shifted its weight between the trees. I heard Tyler's voice again, but wrong this time. Too loud, stretched, broken at the edges. "Damon, don't run." I turned slowly toward the direction it came from. Nothing moved. But in the faint moonlight, I saw something pale between the trunks. Watching me, not attacking, just savoring. Like it wanted to see what fear did to a man like me. I had survived war zones, I had never bowed to fear. But right then, I finally understood I was not the hunter here. Not even close. And that knowledge, raw and undeniable, felt like my first true confession. The forest thinned sooner than I expected. The dense tangle of spruce giving way to a wide clearing bleached silver by the moon. I didn't choose to enter it. My stumbling feet carried me forward before my mind caught up. And then, suddenly there was open air around me, cold and still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. That was when I realized the woods behind me had gone utterly silent. No cracking branches, no mimicked voices, no bone clicking. Just a void. The kind that exists only when a predator is close enough to taste your fear. I turned, and there it stood, blocking the entrance to the clearing, the pale stalker. I had only caught glimpses before, fragments of its form through branches, flashes of white limbs in peripheral vision. But now it stepped into full view under the moonlight, and seeing it completely was a violation of the natural world I was not prepared for. It was tall, with limbs that looked as if they had been stretched beyond human proportions by someone who didn't understand what human anatomy was supposed to resemble. Its arms hung nearly to its knees, tendons exposed like frozen threads beneath waxy skin. And the torso, oh shit. It wasn't a torso at all, but a gaping hollowed cage of ribs, flared outward like an open maw. The spine inside was visible, a sharp ridge running down its back like the keel of a ship. But the face, that was the worst. A skull sheathed in thin, frost-tightened flesh. The skin so pale it was nearly translucent. No lips, no nose, just stretched hide over bone. And the eyes, two reflective deer-like orbs that caught the moonlight and threw it back at me in a cold, glassy shimmer. They weren't eyes designed for seeing. They were eyes designed for hunting in darkness. Horns, elongated and twisted, protruded from its skull, slick and glimmering like branches dipped in blood. Its teeth clicked together in a rapid staccato, a horrible insectal sound that rattled the air and my sanity. It was blocking my only exit, and it didn't rush me. It approached instead, deliberate and confident, its long legs bending wrong, its movements unervingly smooth, like a marionette controlled by an expert hand. This thing could have torn me apart earlier, just as easily as it had the others. But it wanted this moment, this terror. It wanted me to see it fully, to understand completely, to know precisely what hunted me. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar and absolute. Pure, unfiltered helplessness. My legs refused to move. My hands went numb around the rifle. Damon. The voice that came from it was Tyler's, thick with blood, begging. And then Seneca's, crying, ashamed. Then Harlow's, flat, accusing. As if it reached inside my memory and plucked these voices like strings on an instrument, each one perfectly tuned to crack me open from the inside. Its foot dragged forward. I heard the snow crunch, crisp and slow. Its elongated fingers curled, the knuckles bending like frozen twigs. It was going to kill me in this clearing. Not quickly, not mercifully. The pale stalker wanted me afraid when it finally struck. But fear has strange edges. Sometimes, when it sharpens too far, it breaks into something else entirely. Clarity. And in that clarity, I remembered the rules. The stupid ritualistic rules we had laughed at. Rule 4. Do not shoot unless you see the eyes. Anything else is bait. Well, I could see the eyes. The gun came up almost on instinct. Years of training, war zones, and private hunts snapping back into place against the suffocating terror. My hands were shaking so violently the barrel wavered, but I forced it steady, forced myself to breathe, forced myself to pull a trigger that suddenly felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. The shot exploded through the clearing, a single shard of sound piercing the cold air. The bullet struck dead center in the right eye. The stalker's head snapped back with a crack that echoed like breaking ice. It inhaled, a long hollow gasp, and then the scream tore through the forest. A shriek so high and piercing it felt like a blade through my eardrums. Birds erupted from the treetops, branches shook. Snow cascaded in sheets from the trees like an avalanche of white dust. The stalker staggered backward, one eye bursting into a spray of shimmering liquid that steamed against the cold air. Its horns scraped against a birch tree, carving deep slashes in the bark as it writhed. But it didn't fall. It only retreated, jerking backward on those grotesque limbs, its movements suddenly frantic, disjointed, animalistic. It crashed through the trees with unnatural force, tearing a chaotic path into the darkness as it clawed its way deeper into the woods. Its scream faded slowly, echoing between the trunks until it dissolved into the winter air. I stood there shaking harder than I ever had in my life. My breath came in ragged bursts. My ears rang violently. My body felt hollow, like something essential had been ripped out and left in the snow behind me. I knew two things. The creature was not dead, and it would come back for me the moment it recovered. My hands were trembling so hard the rifle nearly slipped from my grip, but I forced myself to stay upright, to move, because if I stayed in that clearing 1 minute longer, I knew the pale stalker would return. And next time, it wouldn't let me fire first. By the time dawn seeped into the trees, I was barely moving, just dragging myself forward, every muscle trembling, every breath like ice scraping down my throat. The forest seemed endless now, stretched into some kind of purgatory where every step only reset the nightmare. The trees pressed in tighter, their silhouettes bending in ways that made my traumatized brain expect to see the stalker crouched behind each trunk. And maybe it was there, watching, just beyond the corner of my vision. I didn't care anymore, or maybe I cared too much. It felt the same. At some point I realized I wasn't navigating. I was wandering, dazed and limping, following sunlight like a dying animal that just wanted to collapse somewhere warm. I don't know how long I moved before I heard blades thundering overhead. A helicopter, real, not imagined, not mimicked. I stumbled toward the clearing, waving my arms, nearly sobbing when the downdraft hit me and scattered snow into the air. 2 men jumped out before the skids even settled. Tall, armed, dressed in matte black gear without insignias. They moved with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they were going to find, or what they hoped they wouldn't. Behind them, a second man stepped down. Black suit, black tie, expression like polished marble. I recognized the look, government type or something like it. "Damon Briggs?" he asked, his voice crisp and flat, like he'd rehearsed the line. "Help me," I rasped. "There's something out there. It killed the others." He held up a hand, a gesture so calm it was almost soothing, until I realized it was meant to shut me up. "We've swept the area," he said. "You're alone out here." I stared at him, blinking, confused. "No," I croaked. "There were cabins, staff, masked people, hunters. I'm not the only one." He exchanged a quick look with the men in black gear. It wasn't confusion, it wasn't concern. It was recognition and dismissal. "All we found," he said slowly, "was a cluster of abandoned structures. No bodies, no signs of struggle. No staff, no participants. Nothing to substantiate your claims." He said claims, the way a psychiatrist says, hallucinations. My skin crawled. "They were real," I snapped. "The pale stalker, whatever the hell that thing is, it killed them. It's still out there, don't tell me." Another raised hand, another calm dismissal. "Mr. Briggs," he said, lowering his voice, "I advise you not to repeat anything you think you saw. Not to us, Not to the press, not to anyone. The phrasing was careful, too careful. Why? I demanded. Because you're covering it up? Because you're working with the masked freaks? Because... He stepped closer, just one step. Enough to let me see the faint smirk hiding behind his professional neutrality. Because, he said softly, some things are not meant for public consumption. The words slithered into my mind like a cold needle. The stalker's rules, the ritualistic ash marks, the silent masked staff, the deliberate curated selection of wealthy hunters. Oh my God! I whispered. You feed it. You all feed it. No one answered, no one needed to. One of the Special Forces men placed a hand on my shoulder. Firm, guiding, almost pitying. Let's get you out of the cold, he said. I was too exhausted, too shattered to fight as they loaded me into the helicopter and flew me back toward civilization, leaving the cursed forest behind. From above, the landscape looked perfectly untouched. No bodies, no cabins, no blood, no trails. As if the wilderness itself had swallowed everything. Maybe it had. A week passed. I barely slept, barely ate. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw reflective eyes in the darkness and heard bone clicking behind me. Doctors labeled it trauma-induced psychosis, stress response, literal hunter's hallucination. They spoke to me like a child, like someone who needed gentle correction. I didn't bother arguing. Was it easier to pretend? Yes. Was it safer? Probably. This morning, while scrolling through news on my tablet, a banner ad slid across the screen. Bright, polished, expensive. A black background, gold lettering. A wolf-masked silhouette. Premium wilderness experience for the elite. Cryptid safari. Apply for invitation. The same font, the same slogan. The same symbol burned into our jackets by the ash mark. My stomach dropped so hard I nearly vomited. They were still doing it, still recruiting, still feeding that thing with moneyed thrill-seekers who believed nothing could touch them. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know whether it's government, cult, corporation, or something worse. But I know what I saw, what tried to kill me, and I know it's not finished. So, if you're reading this, if you're rich, curious, reckless, or just stupid enough to think an illegal cryptid hunt sounds like a story worth bragging about, don't apply, don't go. Because if you step into those woods, there's only one thing out there waiting for you. A creature that knows exactly how you will taste.